It's strange, isn't it? The way betrayal doesn't always come crashing down like thunder, sometimes it whispers. That's how it felt the morning I realized something was wrong. Not a loud realization, no confrontation. Just a small, quiet shift, like a picture frame that had tilted slightly on the wall and you couldn't quite remember when it happened. My name is Clara, and if you'd met me 3 years ago, you'd probably describe me as the kind of woman who still believed in us, in marriages built on teamwork, in shared dreams and in love that survived every hard season. I used to smile easily. I used to trust easily, too. Back then, I was married to Ethan, a man who, at least from the outside, seemed steady. The kind of husband people pointed to at church or neighborhood picnics and said, "You're lucky, Clara. He's one of the good ones." But people only see what you show them. And Ethan was very good at showing people exactly what he wanted them to see. That morning, the one I'll never forget, I was standing in the kitchen making coffee. The air smelled like hazelnut roast and toast just starting to burn in the toaster. The early sunlight slanted through the blinds, striping the counter with soft gold. Ethan was still asleep upstairs. It was quiet, too quiet. I opened my laptop to check an email from my sister, and out of habit, I clicked on my bank tab. I wasn't even thinking. I just wanted to make sure the transfer from my savings had cleared. I'd been setting aside money for months for a small business I dreamed of opening, a floral boutique, something that felt mine. But when the page loaded, my breath caught. My savings balance, the account I'd been building since my 20s before I even met Ethan, was almost empty. For a moment, I thought there had to be some mistake. Maybe a glitch. Maybe I was looking at the wrong account. But no, the transaction history was clear. A series of withdrawals, one after another, over the past 3 weeks. And the name linked to every transfer? Ethan R. Collins. My hand went cold around the coffee mug. He'd sold something. No, moved something. My savings, my future. And just like that, the air in the kitchen felt heavy, like someone had shut a door behind me, sealing me inside a truth I wasn't ready to face. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, not then. Instead, I stood there for a long time, staring at the screen, trying to understand the why. Because you don't just wake up one morning and expect the person you share a life with to steal from you. The rest of that day moved like slow motion. I remember every detail, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, the way the neighbor's dog barked across the street. I made Ethan breakfast as usual. I even smiled when he came downstairs, wearing that lazy grin of his, scratching the back of his neck like he always did when he was tired. "Morning, babe," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. "You're up early." I nodded, pretending to check something on my phone so he wouldn't see my face. "Just couldn't sleep," I said softly. Inside, though, my heart was pounding. He sat at the table, scrolled through his phone, and talked about a potential investment he was considering, something about friends pooling money for a property flip. I barely heard him. Every word sounded like background noise against the roar of my own thoughts. That was the moment I started counting, not just the dollars he'd taken, but the days until I'd find out the truth, until I'd get it back. Because one thing about me, I might break quietly, but I don't stay broken. Later that night, after Ethan went to bed, I sat alone in the living room. The house was dark except for the soft blue glow of the laptop screen. I reread every transaction one by one. My savings had been transferred to a joint account we rarely used, then wired to another account under his name. That was it. No explanation, no note, no conversation. It was so deliberate, so secret. And yet, I remembered his voice earlier that week, telling me, "You don't need to stress about money, babe. I've got us covered." I'd smiled then. Believed him. Now all I could hear in that same voice was deceit. I wish I could say I confronted him that night. But betrayal does strange things to the heart. It makes you question your own eyes. I spent days pretending everything was fine. I made dinners, laughed at small jokes, sent texts about groceries, all while that quiet storm grew inside me. Ethan started coming home later. He said work was getting busy. He smelled of expensive cologne, the kind he never used to wear. I noticed how he'd avoid eye contact when I asked about his investment project. And every time he said, "Trust me, Clara, this is for our future," I wanted to ask, whose future? The day I found the first real clue, I wasn't even looking for it. I was cleaning out the drawer in his study when I found a crumpled paper, a receipt from a car dealership 2 towns over. A deposit of $18,000 in his name. Paid in full. The date matched one of the withdrawals from my savings. I remember sitting on the floor staring at that receipt, my hands trembling so hard the paper shook. He didn't just steal from me. He used my dream to buy himself luxury. That's when something inside me hardened, not in anger, but in clarity. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to make him believe that I still trusted him, and while he relaxed in that illusion, I would quietly, methodically, count down every step until his downfall. Because if he could sell my savings behind my back, then I could build his reckoning right in front of his eyes. Before everything unraveled, our life looked picture perfect, Or at least that's what I told myself. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Portland, Oregon. Our street was lined with maple trees that turned gold every fall, and every Saturday morning you could smell coffee and cinnamon rolls drifting from the bakery down the block. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone waved, where couples walked their dogs at sunset, and where people believed smiles meant happiness. I used to believe it too. Ethan and I met 8 years ago at a charity auction. I was working as a part-time event planner then, still carrying dreams bigger than my budget. He was charming, confident, the kind of man who made eye contact that lingered a little too long but somehow didn't feel wrong. He bought a signed baseball that night, something he clearly didn't care about, just so he'd have an excuse to talk to me. "I didn't even know who this player is," he'd laughed, holding the ball like it was gold. I just figured if I bought it, maybe the event planner would come over and tell me what a great choice I made. I remember blushing, half amused, half curious. And somehow that's how it started, two people from different corners of the same city, finding each other at the right moment. Ethan had this way of making you feel like the world could bend around his confidence. He talked about someday plans like they were already happening, the house we'd buy, the vacations we'd take, the future we'd build together. I used to joke that he lived 10 years ahead of reality, and maybe that's why I didn't notice when his words stopped matching his actions. But in those early years, we were happy. Truly happy. Our first apartment was tiny, with paint peeling near the kitchen sink and a couch that squeaked every time you sat down. But on Sunday mornings, we'd open all the windows, let the cold air rush in, and dance barefoot to old jazz records. He'd twirl me around laughing, saying, "See, Clara, we don't need much, just this." And I'd believe him, every single word. When we finally bought our house, it felt like a shared victory. I'd been saving since my mid-20s, working double shifts and cutting corners. That savings account was my safety net, my quiet pride. Ethan always called it our nest egg. I remember one night sitting by the fireplace, he'd said, "You're amazing, you know that. Most people our age don't think long-term, but you plan. You build." And he kissed my hand like it meant something deep. I didn't realize he was memorizing the very thing he'd later use against me. We weren't without flaws, of course. Ethan had a restless streak, a hunger for more that sometimes felt like ambition, sometimes like impatience. He switched jobs often, chasing better pay, better titles. I'd support him through every change. When one opportunity failed, I'd say, "It's okay. You'll find the right fit." He'd smile and tell me I was his anchor. I thought that was a compliment. I thought it meant he valued me. But sometimes, when I caught him staring out the window late at night, drink in hand, I'd wonder if maybe he saw me as something else, something holding him back. Still, life went on. We hosted dinners with friends, went hiking on weekends, sent holiday cards with our photos printed in glossy perfection. To everyone else, we were the couple who had it all figured out. Even my sister Lena used to say, "Clara, you hit the jackpot with Ethan. He's charming, hardworking, handsome. He even remembers birthdays." I'd laugh and agree, brushing off the little things that sometimes made me uneasy, like the times he'd talk over me at dinner parties, or when he'd say, "Let me handle the finances, babe. You've got enough on your plate." It never sounded controlling, just practical. I wanted to believe he was protecting me from stress. Now I know he was protecting himself from discovery. The first winter in that house was magical. I decorated it myself, pale cream curtains, soft yellow lamps, a few thrifted paintings that somehow made it feel warm. Ethan surprised me with a puppy for Christmas, a golden retriever we named Milo. I still remember that morning, snow outside, the smell of coffee brewing, Milo's tiny paws skidding across the kitchen floor. Ethan had wrapped a red ribbon around the puppy's neck and said, "For my favorite person in the world." I'd hugged him so tightly, tears in my eyes saying, "You didn't have to." He'd smiled and whispered, "I wanted to." Looking back now, I realize how easily I mistook gestures for love. We had our routines. Every morning, I'd wake before him, pack his lunch, and leave a note in the bag, a small reminder that someone believed in him. He'd text me at noon, "You make my days better, you know that?" I saved those messages, every one of them. Our friends called us the steady couple. When people around us divorced or drifted apart, we stayed solid. At least that's what I thought. But even then, small cracks had started to show. Like the way he'd flinch when I asked about our savings goals, or how he'd dodge conversations about long-term plans. And once, I remember this vividly, he came home one night and hugged me longer than usual, his face buried in my neck. His voice was soft, almost guilty when he said, "You trust me, right?" I laughed, confused. "Of course I do. Why would you even ask?" He didn't answer, just nodded and walked away. If I'd known what that question really meant, if I'd known what he was preparing to do, I might have looked him in the eyes that night and asked the one question that would have changed everything. "What are you hiding from me, Ethan?" But love, real love, or what you think is real, makes you blind to the small things. You don't see the quiet betrayals. You only hear the heartbeat you've trusted for years, and you tell yourself it's still in rhythm, even when it's already fading. Those were the days before the storm, the calm I'd later look back on and realize wasn't calm at all. It was the silence before the breaking. Because behind the smiles and small gestures, Ethan was already making plans. Not for our future, but for mine without me in it. It started with small things, tiny, almost forgettable moments that I brushed aside because when you love someone, you tell yourself stories to fill in the silence. The first time I felt it, it was a Saturday morning in early spring. The sun had just come up, and I was sitting by the kitchen window going over some design sketches for my floral boutique idea. Ethan came downstairs looking half awake, rubbing his eyes. "Morning," I said softly, smiling at him. He didn't answer right away. He just stood there for a second, staring out the window like he was somewhere else. When he finally looked at me, his smile was delayed and forced. "Morning, babe," he said. "You working again? You really should take a break sometimes." It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. His voice had this edge I hadn't heard before, like he was hiding irritation under sweetness. I laughed lightly. "It's just a few sketches. You know how I get when I'm planning something." He nodded but didn't reply. Instead, he poured himself coffee, grabbed his phone, and walked out to the porch, something he never used to do before breakfast. Through the window, I saw him typing quickly, glancing over his shoulder once like a teenager sneaking messages. It was nothing, I told myself, just work, probably a friend. But that morning left a splinter in my mind. Over the next few weeks, Ethan began to change in ways that were almost invisible, unless you lived close enough to him to notice. He started carrying his phone everywhere. Even to the shower, he changed his passcode. And when I teased him about it, he chuckled and said, "You watch too many detective shows." He said it like a joke, but there was something guarded in his eyes. One evening, while we were watching TV, he got a call. He muted it quickly and said, "Work thing, I'll step out." But his job wasn't the kind that called on weekends. I sat there on the couch pretending to scroll through my phone, but my chest felt tight. I could hear his voice through the thin living room wall, low, urgent, careful, not the tone of a man discussing business. When he came back, his expression was too casual. "Everything okay?" I asked. He smiled. Yeah, just logistics, boring stuff." He kissed the top of my head and sat beside me. But I couldn't shake the image of him standing outside. Voice hushed, glancing at the window every few seconds. It wasn't jealousy, it was instinct, that quiet, ancient kind of knowing that something isn't right. Then came the missing money. I hadn't checked our accounts in months because I trusted him. He'd always handled the joint bills, the credit card payments, all the logistics. One afternoon, I logged in to check a vendor payment for a small event I was planning and noticed one of our credit cards had nearly hit its limit. We didn't spend like that. Scrolling through, I saw charges that made no sense: high-end restaurants, electronics stores, and a $3,000 charge from a company in another state. The air felt heavy, my skin went cold, and my throat tightened like I'd swallowed stones. When I asked him about it later, he didn't even flinch. "Oh, that," he said, waving his hand. "Business stuff. I told you, the guys and I are pooling funds for a real estate thing. I'll pay it off soon." I wanted to believe him. I did believe him for another week because believing him meant keeping the peace. Then there was the envelope. One night I went into his office to leave a file he'd asked for. I wasn't snooping, I just wanted to be helpful. On the corner of his desk was a thick white envelope. It was open and a check peeked out, written for $25,000, signed by him, made out to someone named Travis Cole. The name meant nothing to me. I called out, "Ethan? Who's Travis Cole?" He appeared in the doorway so fast it startled me. His face was pale. "What are you doing in here?" His tone, sharp and defensive, cut through me. "I was just leaving your file. I saw the envelope and—" He snatched it from the desk before I could finish. "It's business, Clara. You don't need to worry about it." I stared at him, heart pounding. "I was just asking a question." He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry, I didn't mean to snap. It's just stressful, deals, deadlines. I'll explain everything soon, okay?" He smiled, but his eyes didn't soften. That night I couldn't sleep. His voice kept echoing in my head. "You don't need to worry about it." That phrase, said like a kindness, was actually a wall. One evening, while folding laundry, I noticed a faint smell on one of his shirts. Not perfume, something woodsy like cedar and musk, not my scent, and not his usual cologne. When I asked, he chuckled. "You've got a wild imagination, probably from the sample section at the store." He kissed my forehead, but my heart stayed uneasy. I didn't think he was cheating, not then. That would have been too obvious, too simple. No, this was different. It was like he was living a secret life parallel to ours, running quietly beside me, invisible unless I looked from the right angle. The breaking point came one Thursday evening. I was cleaning up after dinner when Ethan came home, looking flushed, nervous even. He hugged me too tightly, then held me by the shoulders and said, "You trust me, right?" The words hit like déjà vu. It wasn't the first time he'd said them. "Of course I do," I whispered. He nodded. "Good, because things are about to change for us. Big things. You'll thank me later." He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that warmed me. It was the kind that chilled. Later that night, I watched him sleep beside me, his breathing slow and even, his hand resting over mine. I realized I didn't feel safe anymore, not because I feared him, but because I couldn't tell who he really was. That was the night I made my decision. If there were secrets in this house, I would find them, quietly, patiently, and when I did, I wouldn't just uncover the truth, I'd make sure he could never bury it again. The truth came to me in pieces, not all at once like lightning, but in small, painful flashes. Each clue was a cut, and by the time I saw the full picture, I was already bleeding from every direction. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I found the message. Ethan had left his laptop open in the kitchen, something he never did anymore. He was upstairs, showering, and I was making tea, trying not to think about how distant we'd become. The screen was black, but when I touched the mouse, the email window appeared. My name wasn't anywhere on it, but the subject line froze me cold. Payment confirmed, property shares complete. It was from a company I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a confirmation of a $62,000 payment, wired from an account under both our names. Attached was a contract, signed only by him. The sender wrote, "Welcome to the Cole Development Partnership. Excited to move forward." Cole, the same name from the envelope. Travis Cole. I remember standing there staring at the words, the sound of the shower running upstairs, the soft hiss of water mixing with the sound of my heart cracking. He had sold my savings, every dollar I had built from years of work, trust, and sacrifice, to fund a deal with strangers, and he hadn't even told me. I printed the contract, folded it neatly, and slipped it into the drawer under the phone, then went back to making tea, my movements slow, mechanical. When Ethan came downstairs, towel slung around his neck, I looked at him like I was seeing a stranger. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, pouring himself coffee. "You look pale." I forced a smile. "Just tired." He nodded and sat at the table. "It's been a long week for both of us." The ease in his tone made me sick. I watched him scroll through his phone, humming under his breath as if everything in our world was fine. For the first time in our marriage, I looked at the man across from me and felt absolutely nothing. No love, no hate, just emptiness, the kind that only comes after betrayal. That night, after he fell asleep, I opened the laptop again. I dug deeper this time. I found folders with contracts, invoices, and messages. He'd been planning this for months, transferring funds, hiding withdrawals under fake bill payments, even setting up an account under his cousin's name to move money quietly. It wasn't just carelessness, it was a system. He wasn't investing for us, he was building something for himself. The worst part, the messages between him and Travis painted a clear picture. Travis wrote, "She doesn't know yet, right?" Ethan replied, "Of course not, she trusts me completely. By the time she figures it out, the deal will be sealed." Travis, "You're a bold man." "Hope it's worth it, Ethan. It will be. I deserve a win." I read that last line over and over until the words blurred through my tears. I deserve a win. Was I a loss to him? Was everything we'd built just something to use, a resource, a tool, a means to an end? I shut the laptop slowly, my whole body trembling. That night I didn't sleep, sitting on the couch until sunrise, staring at the rain streaking down the window. By morning I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to confront him in anger. I was going to let him tell his lies until he ran out of words to hide behind. The next evening, I made dinner like always, roast chicken, his favorite. The house smelled warm and safe. I even lit candles. When he walked in, he smiled, surprised. "Wow, what's the occasion?" "Nothing special," I said softly. "Just thought we could have a nice night. It's been a while." He leaned in, kissed my cheek. "You're the best. You know that?" I smiled back, hiding the storm behind my eyes. We ate in silence for a few minutes before I asked casually, "How's your business project going?" He hesitated just for a second, then shrugged. "Good. Slow start, but promising." "Who's your partner again?" "Oh, just a guy from work, Travis." He took a sip of wine, not meeting my eyes. "Travis Cole?" His hand froze halfway to his mouth. "Yeah, how do you—" I set my fork down carefully. "I saw the contract, Ethan." The room went quiet. He blinked, trying to process what I'd said. "You— what?" "The contract, the one you signed with my money." He leaned back, his jaw tightening. "Clara, it's not what you think." "Really?" My voice shook, but I kept it low. "Because I think you emptied my savings behind my back and used it to buy into some shady deal." He stood up. Pacing, "Listen, it was an opportunity. A once-in-a-lifetime thing, I was going to tell you." "When?" I snapped, standing too. "After you doubled it? Or after you lost it all?" He groaned, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand how business works, Clara. Sometimes you have to take risks." "With my money?" He turned then, anger flashing across his face. "Our money? Everything we have is shared, remember? Marriage, partnership, all that?" I laughed bitterly. "Partnership? You made sure it wasn't. You used my name to make it easier to transfer funds. You lied, Ethan." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a brief second, guilt flickered in his eyes, then it hardened into something else. "Fine," he said quietly. "You're right, I did it. But you'll thank me later. When this pays off, you'll see I did it for us." "For us?" I whispered. "Or for you?" He looked away. "You're being dramatic." That was the moment I realized he didn't even think he'd done something wrong. That was the moment love died. I walked past him, heart pounding, voice trembling but steady. "I want you to move your things to the guest room." He frowned. "What?" "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not being ridiculous," I said. "I'm giving you space. You can use it to think about how you'll fix this, or how you'll leave." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You're not serious." But when he saw my face, calm still, unblinking, his laughter faded. I walked upstairs without another word. Behind me, I heard the sound of his wine glass shattering against the counter. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something important. He had taken my money, but I still had something he didn't control, and that would be the thing to undo him. When the first rush of betrayal faded, it left behind a cold, practical part of me that felt oddly awake. Grief had its place, sure, in quiet rooms and late-night tears, but right then, grief would have been a luxury. I had a life to save and a plan to make. I started small, the way you mend a leaking roof, not with grand gestures, but with steady, sensible fixes. First, I secured what I could. I sat at the kitchen table with the laptop and a cup of tea gone lukewarm and changed every password I knew. Bank logins, email, the simple shared accounts, everything. It felt like patching a wound with Band-Aids, but it was necessary. I moved whatever funds were left into a new account I opened under my name alone, and set up alerts on every transaction. My hand shook when I clicked the confirmation, but I felt a sliver of relief as the screen updated, account secured. Then I started documenting. I copied the contracts, printed the emails, and made a binder, neat, organized, clinical. The smell of printer ink and paper was oddly calming. I labeled each page date, source, relevance. Evidence, I told myself, not for immediate revenge, but for protection. If things escalated, I wanted to be the woman who could show a paper trail that would not be denied. I also made a list of questions, precise, unemotional things I needed to know: how much was transferred, which accounts, who else was involved, which assets were purchased with my money. The list became longer than I expected. I called my sister Lena, not to unload, but for practical help. Lena had a steady head, the kind of person who could measure an argument calmly and then hand you a hammer. When I told her the bare facts, she didn't gasp or offer platitudes. She asked what I wanted to do next. "Do you want me to come by?" she asked. "I can help with the binder and call the bank with you." "Yes," I said. "Please." When Lena arrived, she walked into the kitchen and immediately noticed the binder. She sat down opposite me, folded her hands, and said, "We'll do this step by step. First, call the bank. Then we'll get a lawyer. Don't act rashly, Clara. I know how hot your blood gets. Let's be smart." Her voice steadied me. I liked the word smart. It felt like armor. We called the bank together. A polite woman with a tired voice guided us through freezing some of the accounts and placing holds on transfers. They asked me to verify my identity and sign forms. Lena stood beside me, reading over my shoulder. The bank representative was sympathetic but procedural. There were only so many things they could do without a police report or a court order. Still, they flagged the suspicious transfers and handed me a list of steps to take. The formality of it, the stamped envelopes, the official-looking emails, made the betrayal feel smaller somehow, as if bureaucracy could stitch the wound. Next, I made an appointment with a small attorney who came recommended by a friend from church. Her office smelled faintly of coffee and old books. She was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed and direct. "You did the right thing by documenting," she told me, flipping through my binder. "If we can show the transfers and that they were made without informed consent, we have grounds for civil action and possibly criminal. If we can prove intent to defraud." I felt something cold and satisfied at hearing the words intent to defraud. It meant this wasn't just an ugly marriage fight. This was theft. "What do I do about him?" I asked quietly. "Do I tell him I know? Go to the police?" The attorney, Ms. Alvarez, leaned forward. "Not yet. Let him reveal himself. If you move too fast, he'll bury evidence. We'll file an emergency motion if we need to secure assets. But first, keep collecting. Get copies of every message, every receipt. If you can, record conversations where he admits anything, but be careful. Wiretapping laws vary by state. Let me handle the legal maneuvers. You focus on collecting and securing. Legalese has a way of making everything feel manageable." It gave me a roadmap. I left her office with another list, more phone numbers, and an appointment to meet again the next week. I also hired someone else, not because I wanted to spy, but because I needed a professional eye. A local private investigator named Mark Hollis, mid-50s, salt and pepper beard, who ran a modest firm out of a strip mall office. He wasn't glamorous. He smelled faintly of tobacco and old cologne. But when I told him the facts, he nodded with the patience of a man who'd seen selfishness before. "What do you want me to find?" he asked, tapping a pen. "Everything," I said. "Assets, accounts, where he's been, anything linking my money to purchases he's made." He listened and then set to work with the methodical thoroughness of someone cataloging evidence. He checked public records, scoured property transfers, followed paper trails to shell companies, and numbered bank accounts. A week later, he brought me a folder with copies of titles, dealership documents, and a small list of names that glowed with implication. Travis Cole, Cole Development, LLC, and an address for a property in another county. Every revelation stabbed, but with each stab, I felt less helpless. Knowledge was a kind of power. It didn't heal the wound, but it took away some of the shame I felt, the shame of having been used. Still, I knew I had to be careful. The part of me that wanted to shout, to break things, to publicly shame him, that part was loud and hungry. But Lena and Ms. Alvarez kept me steady. "Patience," they said. "Justice takes time." So I acted like I was patient. I set small traps that were more about watching than catching. I let him talk, let him make moves, and I kept a quiet diary of everything he said. I learned the cadence of his lies. He always prefaced his schemes with flattery. "You're so supportive, you don't deserve this stress." He told me that so often my mouth almost formed the words before I could stop it. At night, when the house was still and Milo slept at the foot of the bed, I would flip through my binder. I ran my fingers over the pages, feeling the bumps of ink, the imprints where the printer had pressed too hard. I imagined each page as a stone, solid, dependable, and I began stacking them into a wall that would keep him from walking away clean. Planning a downfall doesn't feel like victory. It's colder than that. It's a series of small, careful steps taken by a woman who's decided not to be the victim in the story people will tell about her. It's a reclaiming of choice. I still loved him in odd, complicated ways. The memory of his laugh, the way he could make me feel seen in a crowded room. Love doesn't disappear overnight, but it became disciplined. It was the kind of love that puts boundaries around itself and refuses to be weaponized. And beneath everything, a slow, stubborn hope began to grow. Not for revenge that would humiliate him, but for a future where my life would not be defined by his greed. That night, as the house deepened into sleep, I wrote a single line in my diary: "Count down the days, Clara, but do it with grace." The thing about secrets is they never stay buried as long as the liar hopes they will. They rot quietly beneath the surface until one day the smell gives them away. For Ethan, that day came on a Wednesday morning, under the bright, indifferent light of spring. It started when the first official letter arrived. A certified notice from the county office, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Cole. The thick envelope, stamped and sealed, looked harmless enough, but when I opened it, I felt my pulse throb in my throat. It was a tax statement for a property I'd never seen, never signed for, and certainly never approved. A 2-acre lot registered under Cole Development LLC. The amount due was enormous. I stared at the paper until the numbers blurred. The ink smelled faintly metallic, like the taste of betrayal itself. That was the moment I decided to stop hiding. I called Lena. "It's time," I told her. "He's going to learn what it means when the truth comes out." She didn't ask if I was sure. She simply said, "I'll be there." That evening, I set the dining table as if we were about to have an ordinary dinner. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, salad, the kind of meal I used to make when I wanted peace in the house. The irony made me smile, though there was nothing peaceful about what was coming. Ethan came home late, as he often did now. His tie hung loose and he smelled faintly of expensive cologne and something else, maybe whiskey. He looked tired, but there was a certain smug ease in the way he moved, like a man who believed he was winning at a game no one else knew he was playing. "You cooked?" he said, hanging his jacket over the chair. "What's the occasion?" I kept my voice soft. "I thought we should eat together." "It's been a while," he smiled. "You're right. Been too much stress lately." I served him food, poured wine, and watched him eat. He talked about some new opportunity he was working on, another investment, another potential big win. He didn't notice how I barely touched my plate. When he lifted his glass, I said quietly, "I got a letter today." He froze mid-sip. "What letter?" "From the county, about a property registered under Cole Development LLC." I looked him dead in the eye. "It lists both our names, but I never signed for it." For a long, thin second, silence stretched between us like a drawn wire. Then he laughed too quickly, too loudly. "Oh, that's nothing, Clara, just a mix-up. A clerical issue. You know how messy these filings can be?" I reached behind me and laid the document on the table. "Does this look like a mix-up to you?" His eyes flickered just once, but it was enough. He tried again, softening his tone. "Honey, listen. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to worry you. I was trying to build something, for us. You've been under so much stress with work and—" I cut him off. Don't talk to me like I'm a child you're protecting from grown-up matters. You sold my savings, Ethan, behind my back. I have the records, the transfers, everything." His jaw tightened. His face changed, that quick, sharp shift from charm to defensiveness that I'd seen before but ignored. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "Does it matter?" I said. "You took what wasn't yours. You gambled with my future." He stood up, pacing. "You don't understand how business works, Clara. You never did. Sometimes you have to take risks. It's not personal. Not personal." My voice rose, but only slightly. "You used me. My name, my money, my trust." He turned on me then, sharp and cold. "I built this life. You think that house, that car, that job you love, you think any of that would have happened without me? You should be thanking me for taking initiative." I laughed. It surprised even me. The sound was low, bitter, steady. "Thanking you? For stealing from me?" "Don't dramatize," he snapped. "It's temporary. I'll fix it." "Like you fixed the last deal?" I said. "Like you fixed our marriage?" He stopped talking then. The mask cracked, and what showed underneath wasn't regret. It was arrogance stripped bare, the kind that believes love is just another resource to exploit. I didn't say another word. I slid the letter toward him along with the binder, my silent verdict. He glanced at the cover, at the neat labels, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something new in his eyes. Fear. "Clara," he said slowly, "what is this?" "Documentation," I replied. "Everything you've done. Every transfer. Every property. It's all there. I've already filed with an attorney and the bank is cooperating." He stared at me as if seeing a stranger. And maybe in that moment he was, because I wasn't the quiet, accommodating woman who once believed in his charm. I was the woman he underestimated, the one who could burn down a life and still walk away with her dignity intact. He tried to reach for me then, his voice suddenly soft again. "We can fix this, baby. Please don't do this." I stood up, pushing my chair back. "It's already done." The next few weeks unfolded like a slow domino fall. The bank froze his accounts. The lawyer filed the complaint. And soon enough, people started talking. It began with whispers at the firm where he used to work, murmurs about financial discrepancies. Then a supplier he'd dealt with publicly accused him of defaulting on payments. His business partners started pulling out one by one. The shine he wore so easily, the easy grin, the confidence, began to dull. His calls went unanswered. His friends stopped visiting. Even his younger brother, who once worshipped him, told me quietly, he did this to himself. I didn't need to ruin him. He was doing that on his own. All I did was let the truth breathe. And the truth, once set free, did what truth always does. It dismantled the lies piece by piece. Still, I didn't gloat. I couldn't. There's no joy in watching someone collapse, even when they've earned it. There's only relief and a quiet kind of sorrow that things ever had to come to this. But at night, when I sat by the window with a cup of tea, I would allow myself one small thought, not of revenge, but of balance restored. And I would whisper to myself, this is what justice looks like when it doesn't need to scream. Justice doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, in paperwork, in signatures, in the slow but steady way the world begins to right itself. A few months after everything fell apart, I woke up one morning to the sound of birds outside my window. It was early spring again, the same season when I'd discovered the betrayal, but the air felt different this time, lighter, unburdened. Ethan had officially moved out by then. The divorce proceedings were in motion, and while he fought bitterly in the beginning, his energy waned as the evidence mounted. The court froze several of his assets. He had no ground left to stand on. The last time I saw him was in that courthouse hallway, pale, tired, wearing a suit that no longer fit quite right. He looked smaller somehow, as though his confidence had evaporated. When our eyes met, there was a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. Not love, not hate. Maybe recognition that we'd both finally reached the end of whatever story we'd been telling ourselves. He tried to speak, his lips parted, but I raised my hand slightly. There's nothing left to say, Ethan, I told him. You chose this. He nodded once, eyes glassy, and turned away. That was it. No dramatic outburst, no apology worth remembering, just silence, a silence that closed a chapter. After that day, I began to rebuild. Not in the grand, cinematic way people imagine when they think of starting over, but in small, deliberate steps that felt personal and real. I sold the house. It took me weeks to make that decision, but in the end, I realized I didn't want to live among ghosts. Every room whispered memories, the laughter that used to echo in the kitchen, the way his cologne lingered on the stair rail. I didn't want reminders, I wanted air. So I found a small apartment downtown, nothing fancy, but sunlit with wide windows and a balcony that overlooked a park. The first night I slept there, I felt a strange mix of grief and peace. I cried a little, then made tea, wrapped myself in a blanket, and watched the city lights shimmer through the glass. For the first time in years, I felt safe. The healing wasn't linear. Some days I woke up ready to take on the world, and others I barely had the energy to make breakfast. There were moments when I still missed him. Not the man he became, but the man I thought he was. That's the cruel part about betrayal. It doesn't just break your trust in someone else, it breaks your trust in your own judgment. Lena helped me through that. She came over often, bringing food, laughter, and the kind of honesty only a sister can get away with. Stop blaming yourself, she told me once as we folded laundry together. You were loyal. That's not a flaw. That's your strength. I smiled faintly. Sometimes strength feels like foolishness. She shrugged. Maybe, but I'd still rather be you than him. I didn't respond then, but her words stayed with me. They became a quiet mantra whenever the self-doubt crept in. 6 months later, the court finalized everything. I got back part of the money, not all, but enough to start fresh, to breathe without fear. Ethan's reputation, however, never recovered. He wasn't in jail. Ms. Alvarez had told me the prosecutors weren't pressing criminal charges yet, but his business was gone. His investors had turned away, and his name had become something people avoided mentioning. I didn't celebrate his downfall. By then, it didn't matter to me anymore. What mattered was that I'd survived, not bitter, not broken, just changed. One quiet evening, I went for a walk around the park near my apartment. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and rain. A small child was blowing bubbles near the fountain, and I found myself smiling at the way they shimmered in the golden light. I realized that was something I hadn't done in a long time, smile without effort. That night, I wrote in my journal, the same one that had once held lists of evidence and plans. Healing doesn't look like revenge. It looks like waking up one day and realizing you no longer care who hurt you. You just care about who you're becoming. In time, I went back to school, part-time business courses, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. I wanted to understand the systems that had once overwhelmed me, the banking terms, the contracts, the fine print. Knowledge felt like freedom now. I met people too, kind, ordinary people who didn't want anything from me except conversation. A woman from my class invited me to volunteer at a local shelter, and before I knew it, I was spending my weekends there, cooking, organizing drives, listening to stories. There was something healing about that, giving my time without expecting anything in return. I didn't think much about love, not for a long while. But one afternoon, as I sat on that same park bench where I'd first moved in, a man sat beside me, tall, quiet, with kind eyes. He asked if I'd been feeding the pigeons. I laughed and told him no, they were just freeloaders. We talked for almost an hour about books, travel, small things. His name was Michael, and he was nothing like Ethan. He didn't try to impress me, he just listened. When he laughed, it was soft, real. I didn't feel fireworks. I felt calm. And after everything I'd been through, calm felt like the rarest kind of magic. Weeks turned into months. I built new routines. My mornings began with sunlight, coffee, and no sense of dread. I worked, I studied. I called Lena often. And one day, as I stood on my balcony watching the sunset turn the sky into a wash of pink and gold, I realized I hadn't thought about Ethan in weeks. His name no longer carried pain, just distance. The wound had closed, not perfectly, but enough. I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, maybe sometimes the real downfall isn't theirs. It's ours, the fall into believing we can't stand again. And maybe healing is just learning that we can. When I look back on that time now, it feels almost like another lifetime. Like I was a different woman living inside a story I can still feel but no longer bleed from. There are days when I still find reminders, old photos in a box, a necklace he once bought me, an email buried deep in my archives, but I no longer flinch when I see them. They don't carry the same weight anymore. They're just echoes of who I used to be, of what I had to lose to finally find myself. Sometimes healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about remembering it clearly enough that you'll never let it happen again, but softly enough that it no longer defines you. For a long time, I thought his betrayal was the end of me. I thought I'd never trust again, never rebuild, never love without fear. But I was wrong. What ended that day wasn't my life. It was the illusion that someone else was responsible for it. I used to think love meant merging, becoming one, blending our dreams, our money, our hearts, until I couldn't tell where I ended and he began. But now I understand love differently. Love should never erase you. It should see you clearly and still choose to stay. A few weeks ago, I ran into someone who used to know us both, an old family friend. She looked at me with cautious curiosity, as though she expected to find a broken woman. But when she said, "I heard about what happened," "You must have been devastated," I smiled softly and said, "I was. But I'm better now. And I meant it because I am. I'm not the same Clara who once measured her worth through someone else's validation. I'm the woman who can look in the mirror and know that she survived something meant to break her and came out sharper, kinder, stronger. I still believe in love, but I also believe in boundaries. I believe in paying attention to the quiet signs, the missed eye contact, the unspoken guilt, the small ways someone dismisses your intuition. Because the truth is, betrayal never happens in a single moment. It happens slowly, in ignored conversations, in its nothing explanations, in the way we silence our own discomfort just to keep the peace. Peace bought at the cost of your own dignity isn't peace. It's surrender. If I could go back and speak to the woman I was before it all fell apart, I'd tell her this. Don't ever let your loyalty become a cage. Don't ever love someone so blindly that you forget to keep your own eyes open. And when someone shows you who they are, believe it the first time. There's a kind of quiet justice in what happened, not because he was ruined, but because I rebuilt. That's the part people forget when they talk about revenge or downfall. The real power isn't in watching someone else lose. It's in realizing you've already won by choosing peace over pain. I don't know where Ethan is now. Maybe he's still chasing another big deal. Maybe he's sitting somewhere wondering how it all slipped away. But me? I'm right here, living, learning, loving, and finally free. Sometimes when I'm out walking in the park, I catch sight of couples holding hands, and I don't feel envy anymore. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that I know the difference now between love that heals and love that hides. Because once you've learned the hard way, you start to see it everywhere. The small kindnesses, the honesty in someone's eyes, the respect in the silence between words. That's what love really looks like. And if there's one thing I want you, whoever's listening, to take from my story, it's this. You can lose almost everything and still come out whole, as long as you never lose yourself. Your voice, your worth, your peace, protect them like the treasures they are. When I recorded this story, I hesitated before turning on the microphone. Part of me wondered if anyone would understand. But then I remembered how many women, how many people, have lived some version of this story, trusting, loving, forgiving, and then learning the hardest truth of all, that sometimes the person you need to save isn't them, it's you. So here I am, sharing my story, not because I'm proud of what I endured, but because I'm proud of who I became after it. And if my voice reaches even one person who's sitting in silence right now, wondering if they'll ever feel strong again, this is for you. You will. You already are. You just don't know it yet. Would you have done what I did? Would you have stayed quiet, built your plan, and waited for justice to unfold? Or would you have confronted him the moment you knew? Tell me in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please subscribe, share, and stay with me for more true stories of strength, truth, and second chances. Because sometimes healing starts with a voice that says, "You're not alone."